大家好，香港時間依家係朝頭早嘅5點半，收睇緊嘅係 Action World 世界頻道同埋 Facebook 直播。依家咧喺英國倫敦嘅另一邊咧，我哋有 Benedict Rogers Hong Kong Watch 嘅共同創辦人同埋 CEO 喺度嘅。恭喜發財 Ben, how are you?
Thank you very much. Kung Hei Fat Choi as well. Happy Year of the Dragon.
Yes. Now, some people might have noticed already through your website and other social media that you were testifying before the Canadian Parliament yesterday on the 13th about Jimmy Lai's situation. And also a few days ago, Sebastian Lai, a son of Jimmy, was also at the hearing through video conferencing. Do you mind if you just very briefly tell us what you were saying? And we already know that you asked for immediate, unconditional release of Jimmy. But is there, if you may just elaborate more on the hearing from yesterday?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it was a very important hearing. I think it's part of an inquiry that the Subcommittee on Human Rights is doing on Jimmy's case specifically. And as you mentioned, they had a session last week. I was on last night with several other people, including Ambassador James Cunningham, the former American Consul General to Hong Kong. And my basic message in my remarks, and I think all the witnesses were united in what we were saying, was first of all to call on Canada to step up its efforts to call for the immediate and unconditional release of Jimmy. I also advocated Canada to impose sanctions on those responsible for human rights violations in Hong Kong. And I particularly made the point to the committee that the several United Nations special rapporteurs have now commented very strongly on Jimmy's case. On the eve of the Universal Periodic Review at the UN, 4 UN special rapporteurs called for the release of Jimmy Lai. And then just a couple of weeks ago, the UN special rapporteur on torture specifically said that one of the key witnesses for the prosecution, who's due to appear soon, Andy Lee, there's very strong evidence that he was tortured when he was in detention in mainland China, and therefore his evidence cannot be relied on because it's been obtained through torture. And that was a very important message to give.
What's the worst case scenario? I should, of course, it's very sad to say we have to plan for the worst. The good will take care of itself. But it seems like, Hong Kong is getting more and more draconian with the upcoming Article 23 as well. What would be the worst case scenario for Jimmy? I'm looking at always looking for miracles, but what do you think?
Well, I think the absolute worst case scenario would be, and I really hope and pray this does not happen, but the worst case scenario would be an extremely long sentence, perhaps a life sentence or certainly several decades sentence, combined with, and this is worst case scenario, combined with possibly moving him to mainland China. That is possible. Now, we have to really keep the spotlight on the case, because I think international attention, sustained international attention, could prevent that worst case scenario. But even in a best case scenario, he's going to get a long sentence. And then the question is what happens after that?
And a lot of people are thinking maybe, use his health as an excuse and then strike a deal with the UK and US government. Do you think that is possible?
I think it's possible. I don't know what the arrangement would be, and obviously I can't speak for any government. But I certainly hope that that is an option, and that the UK and the US will try for that.
Right. Now the Canadian this special hearing, it's over, and then you have been also in DC as well, right? Because I was just following your social media. Were you doing something similar to what you did at the Canadian Parliament a few days ago?
I was, yes. I was in Washington, D.C. A couple of weeks ago, and I was doing several things. I testified at a hearing in the U.S. Congress organized by the Congressional Executive Commission on China, chaired by Congressman Chris Smith. I was also participating in the International Religious Freedom Summit. And I spoke at two events specifically on Jimmy Lai's case, two film screenings of the documentary film The Hong Konger about Jimmy, and I spoke on a panel at both of those events.
Now, the Year of the Dragon started a few days ago. It seems like the work that you do is becoming more and more challenging. The Alliance case, it's going to be conducted sometime this year, and then the verdict will be passed out. The 47 should be out, I don't know, hopefully in a month or two, and Jimmy's case will be ongoing until at least till June, right? So this is a very critical year, 2024. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, the last several years have each one has been a critical year for Hong Kong, but I think this one once again will be a really key year because of the trials and verdicts that you've mentioned, and also, of course, we've just had the announcement of the consultation on Article 23, and the prospect of Article 23, I think, is going to make things even worse in Hong Kong.
How about the sanctions that you propose, sanctioning John Lee, and then the former administration from the U.S., the Trump administration, already sanctioned John Lee, Chris Tang, and all that. More sanctions? Do you think it would help? And also the Magnitsky Act, which goes deep and wide into the relatives and also the siblings, right? How deep and wide can it go if it is Magnitsky Act type of sanction?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's very important that more countries impose sanctions. So far, only the United States has done so.
Yeah.
And I think it would send a really powerful message if the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, European countries, or the European Union itself impose such sanctions. And if there were coordinated sanctions by all of those countries, that really could make life pretty difficult for those officials who are sanctioned, and it would send a extremely strong message. And my worry about the fact that countries apart from the US have not imposed sanctions yet is that it sends the wrong message by not sanctioning. It shows that Beijing can get away with destroying an international treaty, destroying Hong Kong's freedoms with impunity, with no consequences. So that's why sanctions by other countries are important. I think with Magnitsky sanctions, and one of the reasons I support Magnitsky sanctions is that they need to be carefully targeted. I don't advocate blanket sanctions on Hong Kong as a whole, or even necessarily. I remain to be convinced about sanctioning family members or siblings, because those family members are not necessarily responsible for the abuses that the individual official is committing. So I would favor targeted sanctions against individual officials, but including things like, if they own property in Canada or in London or elsewhere, and financial assets, those are, and so in that sense, yes, it could affect their wider family, but it would be targeted at the individual themselves.
Well, with the Article 23 to be implemented very soon, I think it will be sometime in May or June or earlier. We are moving the World Hong Kong Forum actually ahead of what is originally planned. And definitely thank you also, Ben, for helping me write a preface for the new book, The Path to True Freedom. And thank you once again for doing that. And I think there's a lot of work in the first half of this year for everyone who cares about Hong Kong.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure to contribute that to the book. And yes, you're right. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think it's really important that we don't lose hope and we don't give up, even though it seems it seems on the surface a losing battle. It seems a very hard battle, but I think we have to keep the spotlight on Hong Kong, and we have to keep the pressure up.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ben, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you.